we have the ability to control, even though we can't control how many times we get sued, we can reduce our exposure by best practices. And I think that approaching that on the front end is liable to have a positive effect on the back end of what we end up laying out in exposure and expenses. So again, the 30,000 foot level, I'm looking at probably the best comparison that we could probably do to try to get apples to apples, and we're looking at a savings of 33,000 plus the Lexipol savings of another 18. And I do appreciate, John, you letting us know that after we've had an opportunity to have some experience in this, we can make a better informed decision and maybe adjust the type of program that we're in, that based on actual experience. Sure. and what we do. So those are only all the comments that I have. So if there's no more discussion from council, may I have a motion?
Well, are we going to talk? Do you not want to talk about the different rates, or are we just going to pay them $2 million? I mean, have you? I mean, I know you were comparing apples to apples, so we didn't even think about looking at that. But is that something that you think we would be able to save money on?
Did John say we had until July 1st to decide on which way to go?
Yeah, he did. We can
get more information.
We can spend some more time on that and examine that and kind of look at the options moving forward.
Got the run numbers.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can definitely do that on the workers' compensation side.
Yeah. So is there a portion of this then that we could approve and come back and look at the numbers and see what we come up with regard to that item? Yes.
If I might suggest that you move forward with the items tonight and then allow us to work with your staff, who've been just great to work with. I meant to start with complimenting both Chris and Erica, to work with them to come up with revised numbers for you to consider different retention levels. And then if you choose to take an action at your next meeting or the one thereafter, we can change tonight's action by that action. That way we can get all of our processes started, irrespective of which level of coverage you choose to take.
Okay, well, you're on tape, so
we can do that. We can also approve the resolutions excluding the workers' comp one, so we can do the excess, the JPA, and other ones.
Good with that?
Yeah. Or would we approve all of
Erica, do you want to make a motion?
No, just change the resolution if we decide to change. I thought that was what John said.
Yeah, John did say that you could approve all the items before you. We can bring back the changes or the estimates at the next council meeting, and we can provide that to the council, and if the council wishes to change it at that time, we can do that as well.
But we would stand with the premium the way it would be right now, or the retention, the 1.2.
Correct.
1.9.
And then we could also, just as a point of returning back to council, provide those numbers back to the council at the next council meeting.
Right.
And if the council chooses to change the action, we could do that. But it's up to whatever the council wishes to do.
I think that's easier, because if we don't change it, then the number is there, but if we do, then we only have to change it once. But I will say that I'm more comfortable doing it this way with him, but we've been burned before, so I think we need to do the way John recommended it, and then just look at the numbers. Well, and I think we can say it in the motion, right? Yeah. All right, so I move that we approve this, joining the JPIA and giving Chris the authority to, let me get all the way back to this whole thing here. Let's see, all right, to complete our membership requirements with the JPIA, approving the resolutions. Yeah, this is real weird.
If you look at the PowerPoint behind you, it's got action items.
But are we going to pend it?
Bring back the workers' comp numbers subject to council change at the next council
For
meeting.
further consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, for consideration. Okay. All right, so we'll approve the resolution approving the execution of the joint powers agreement, the resolution for establishing the policy which delegates the tort liability claims, handlings, the resolution of the city council and the city of Hemet authorizing the pooling of self-insurance, which I think is still weird, through the excess liability protection program, and a resolution of the city council authorizing the pooling of self-insurance through the primary workers' compensation program, and the resolution of the city council of the city of Hemet providing workers' compensation coverage for certain city of Hemet volunteers. And staff will bring back any changes.
We have
We need number 2 as well.
item 2 and 3 probably need to be added.
And authorize the withdrawal from CSAC and appoint, are we going to make that a motion right now too? And we'll make a motion to appoint somebody, 2 people, to this JPIA board. But we definitely want those numbers as part of the motion. And I'll second that.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second.
Yeah, who's the delegate?
Well, that was going to be my next question. Before we take a vote on this, let's go ahead and establish the delegate and the alternate delegate to this. Any volunteers?
Nominate you for the delegate and Carly for the alternate.
Okay with that?
All right.
Okay. So part of the friendly amendment to that motion is I'm designated as the delegate and you're the alternate. Okay, we all clear on the motion? We have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, that motion passes 4-0. Thank you all for a thorough staff report. John, thank you for joining us telephonically and fielding our questions. We appreciate all the good work that's gone into this up to this point, and I look forward to a good experience going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, we have item 21B, which is 2019 California Plumbing, Mechanical, and Electrical Code Update Comparison. And we have Sarah back with us.
Hey, Sarah, is this the last one? There's one more after this, or 2 more after this?
At least one for me. I think we're going to try to rope the fire chief in to do his code for you.
Oh, okay.
He missed that, so I think he volunteered.
Sounds good.
All right, so tonight we brought 3 codes back to you, the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. They kind of go hand in hand. So again, I updated the matrix I had in this PowerPoint presentation to add the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. They are made by 3 code-making bodies, so they don't quite line up as well as the residential and the building code do. And then the items that were missing in these charts, I've outlined in our PowerPoint presentation because those are some items you guys had concerns with 2 council meetings ago. Okay, so in regards to the plumbing permit or the plumbing code, if you'll remember, you had all concerns that we had removed some exemptions for the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. So I wanted to just bring them back and show you the comparison between how it was stated in the building and residential code and how it's stated in the plumbing code. Now, the plumbing code is the model language. We didn't make any revisions to it, so it's as is. So still, the requirements of what's exempt from permits still stand, or still are the same between all the codes. The next is the mechanical code. Again, it's the building residential code compared to the mechanical code. It looks like there's less exemptions in the mechanical code as adopted, but if you read closely, like items number 1, 2, and 3, they've just accumulated them or combined them all into number 1 under the mechanical code. So the exemptions are still the same as what we removed from the previous codes and how the model code and the mechanical section adopted it. All right, and then there's the electrical code. So there are differences between the building residential code and the electrical code. And those differences are in number 4, where it talks about pretty much it's low voltage electrical. In the NFPA adopted electrical code, they have a section dedicated just to this low voltage section. So any of the exemptions are listed in those sections specifically. And then in regards to number 5, I haven't really been able to find a good reason why they didn't adopt that into the electrical code, except that it's common sense. We're not going to allow you to get a permit to buy a lamp at the local store and plug it into the wall. It's just not going to happen. So that's what Section 5 says, is that we don't require permits for approved plug-and-play type of equipment. All right, and then, like I said, it's written by a different code-making body, so the code section regarding the fees is a little different. So all we did to amend it was to reference our schedule of fees that the council adopted several years ago. And then this last item is regarding qualified persons to install electrical. In the 2016 code, we put it in there that it was required to have a licensed electrician to install commercial electrical. We just added this code cycle to clarify to the contractors that residential units, 4 units or more, are actually considered commercial. So we just wanted to clarify that. We've had some issues with people trying to say that they're not required to do that. Then it also states in there the second section where it says the electrical system that's been altered to an extent that's in violation of the code. That also requires to have a licensed electrician repair it, and those would be situations where there was vandalism, where they need to go in and actually possibly maybe rebuild the equipment and have a field examination body come out and actually recertify the equipment again. So with that being said, that's all the amendments we made to these 3 code sections, or these 3 codes. Again, we'll take your comments and, make any revisions you'd like us to see, and then we'll bring all the revisions back at a later time. So with that, if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to address.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Linda, questions? Each one's getting shorter.
Yeah, I have nothing. I think you did a great job.
Okay. Well, let's wait a moment till we have Councilmember Meyer back at the dais.
No questions?
No questions? Okay. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion on item 21B.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a motion to approve and a second. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Wright?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
For the record, Councilmember Meyer stepped away from the dais.
Thank you.
Okay, that motion passed.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to item 21C, the novel coronavirus COVID-19 emergency declaration update. And we have a staff report from our city manager. And before you start, Councilmember Percival, are you joining us?
Yes, I'm back on the line.
Okay, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, considering it's only 9:15 right now, we are way ahead of the last council
Don't
meeting
even go
schedule,
there.
So we've got loads of time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Mayor. As noted initially at the March 16th meeting, the council did declare the local emergency. The council did direct that this get brought back, or an update be provided at every single council meeting after that 16th meeting. And so we've provided these updates since then. With that, there's some substance to the staff report that I'll go over with the council. On April 15, 2020, the President released guidelines to state and county governments in order to enter into a phased reopening. This framework requires a 14-day downward trajectory of documented cases and COVID-like symptoms and the ability to test and treat patients without crisis care. It is only after these conditions exist that the phase outline may be considered. This document is included as attachment 1 in the backup of the staff report. On April 14, 2020, the governor announced 6 factors to determine when the state would reopen. The detailed plan is included as attachment 2 and requires the following. Number 1, the ability to monitor and protect communities through testing, contact tracing, isolating, and supporting those who are positive or exposed. Number 2, the ability to prevent infection in people who are at risk for more severe COVID-19. The ability of the hospital and health systems to handle surges. Number 4, the ability to develop therapeutics to meet the demand. Number 5, the ability for businesses, schools, and child care facilities to support physical distancing. And 6, the ability to determine when to reinstitute certain measures, such as the stay-at-home orders, if necessary. Riverside County issued an amended order relaxing some of the restrictions, but it furthered the requirements for social distancing and face coverings. The County Board of Supervisors discussed the rescission of the county health orders on May 5th, 2020, but the board tabled that conversation of reopening the county. Under the current circumstances, the City of Hemet is bound by the existing health orders and the governor's existing executive orders. I should add that in the time that we noticed or published this agenda to now, the county did rescind all of the county health director's orders with respect to social distancing, as well as the wearing of masks. It did still mandate the closures of K-12 schools. While the city has not seen any formal plans on reopening Riverside County, I joined a conference call hosted by Supervisor Washington to discuss the region's economic recovery on May 7, 2020. The City of Hemet has a strong interest in providing input and recommendations for the county's plan for reopening from both a public health perspective as well as an economic perspective. As we continue to collaborate with various planning groups for reopening, it's very important that I receive the collective council input so that I can share the opinions and the consensus of the Hemet City Council in those discussions. Staff provided an update on the local economic impact of COVID-19 at the April 28, 2020 council meeting, and we've attached the county's COVID-19 trajectory as attachment 3 in your agenda backup. Geared with this information, staff does request that the council collectively provide its preference and thoughts on reopening and what the council would like to see when the region begins to reopen. The council's position will assist in communicating to the public, participating at various stakeholder meetings, as well as in other pertinent and related discussions with regional groups and other like-minded associations. So the information below includes the updates since the last council meeting on April 28, 2020, and I'll go through those briefly. On April 29, 2020, IT staff coordinated the restoration of the city's PEG channel, and it is now live and operational. We have a number of PSAs that are being broadcast on that on a looping basis. It does include video updates from the mayor that he provided to the community, as well as remembering when the story of Mr. Whittier's Hemet. It also features information on food resources for seniors, information hotline phone numbers for COVID-19 testing, and other COVID-19 related information. We are currently working with the school district to broadcast this year's graduations and make sure that individuals that have access to that channel are able to see those graduations, since they will be broadcast on that channel, and they won't be held in person. Riverside County did make resources available for food delivery to seniors throughout the jurisdiction, and we prepared information and shared it through the city's social media platforms and released it on the city's PEG channel. On May 4th, The police department dispatch did return to the traditional shift schedule. Patrol will return to regular shift schedules on May 18th. And on May 7th, staff began working on a page on the city's website specifically for businesses so they can more easily navigate the variety of resources available to them. And we're consistently receiving feedback from the community, council members on information that may be included there or different avenues to provide information to the community. And we are evaluating all of those mechanisms to make sure that we're providing the most avenues that we can so that the public can get the information from the city in the various forms that we have provided. So with that, that includes a staff report. Again, I do want to make sure that I get direction from the council on those items with respect to the council's position and thoughts on reopening the region and any input related to that moving forward. So that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, for that summary of your report. And I'll bring it to council for questions and discussion. Bonnie?
Well, I was able to listen to all of the counties meeting on Friday and commend them for the time that they took, 2 separate special meetings to go over all this and the considerations involved. I think they were certainly cautious, but certainly open to amending the guiding principles and best practices and the recommendations that they ultimately brought forward. And I'm not sure whether or not that's actually been voted on, because they did go back to staff. I mean, it was recommended that, let me see here, the direction was the Board of Supervisors adopted by 5-0 vote and provided to the county staff last night to further develop the county-wide standards and prevention measures. So it was directed to staff to further develop what they recommended on last Friday. So I think it's all open for additional interpretation and what is good for, I think they did their due diligence and came up with a pretty good plan moving forward that still needs some development, plain and simple. So I'll ask them further questions later.
Okay. Linda?
Yeah, I listened to it too. It was quite interesting on their summations, what they came up with. But I don't think they rescinded or tried to rescind any authority from the state of California.
They did not.
Because even though Jeff Hewitt wanted that, I was very surprised that Kevin Jeffries was the loudest voice against doing that, mainly because it may mean money from the state and from the feds to go up against the person who is our governor at this point. But absolutely, they, with the masks and the social distancing, highly recommending it, but hey, it's your choice. They did not move further than what the governor has said as far as businesses opening or anything else. However, they have really garnered support from surrounding counties, and there was talk even today that filing a joint lawsuit with all the cities and all the counties in Southern California to force the governor to change some of his less than practical steps going forward as to the these are the mandates you have to hit as far as people being hospitalized or people dying or people doing this and whatever. And it's like, that's just about every county, I think, in California and all cities are saying that there's no way that we would probably ever be able to achieve that. So my biggest fear in thumbing our nose at the governor is his ability to cut off funding to supplement the loss of tax dollars that we will get and layoffs that we will probably have to do. And also that if we say go ahead, businesses go ahead and open, and they have any type of state regulation attached to their business, they could lose their licenses. And I'm not going to be responsible for that. I heard today that got a phone call and said, businesses are open for dining. And I said, no, they're not. The governor has not said in dining as yet. However, he's wavering. And I think there's so many entities, so many cities and counties and the league and this program, new program support for local recovery. I mean, the governor is getting bombarded exactly like he should to loosen up the reins and let us be smart about it, but let it be more of a local choice. And if that local choice is still connected to getting funding, federal dollars and state dollars to bail us out of here, I say we go along with it and just apply pressure to it. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Carla?
And a way to apply pressure to it could be not making a stance here, but as far as some of the other cities around us have Red Wildemar's, San Jacinto's, and we don't have the resources because of the size of our community, the issues that we deal with, to make that a priority. So saying that does not give us, it doesn't put it on us. You know what I'm saying? We still live in America and it's our choice. And we're not going to tell people, you answer to your licensee, whoever licenses you. And it's just like wearing a mask. Everybody has to take their own, make their choices and take responsibility for what they're doing. And that's a risk that they need to take solely on themselves without having to, they don't need to worry about us, but they need to know where everybody stands. And if we're clear on where we stand, back to Linda's point, if we can stop the number of drunk drivers that are killing people every day and stop the number of accidents and deaths that way and all of the, as if we can do that.
Right.
So.
And I think that is, and I'm sorry you didn't recognize me. I'm just having a conversation here.
I see that.
I'm your biggest offender, and I will say I'm the second. It is that type of thing where, and I agree with Michael, and I agree with so many people in that the numbers don't bear out the threat that we have been threatened with. I thoroughly appreciated Sheriff Bianco's public statement that even the supervisors applauded for him, in that he was not going to arrest people for these things because he was not going to make criminals out of the citizens. And I absolutely agree with that. And that's his choice, and that's in his realm, where I have, and again, putting pressure on, they always say, deal with science, not politics. Well, I'm sorry, now it's political pressure on Newsom, and that's the only thing he's going to cave to. And if we join if you talk city managers meeting, get all the cities to write a letter and not just sign a letter. Everybody write a letter and just flood his inbox with, this is what you're doing to us. You not only are destroying the economy, you're destroying the emotional and mental well-being of the citizens that live here. The people who have no choice but to go to food banks because they don't have any money coming in. And it irritated me with those phone calls. Now, I'm going to get really passionate about this, and I'm going to get accused of hollering. But when you have a phone call from a large group of people who are securely employed in their job, and most of them are government workers or teachers or whatever. They are secure in their jobs. They're not getting a pay cut. They will eventually, because when this sales tax issue trickles down, schools aren't going to be funded, cities aren't going to be funded, and they're going to lose their jobs, and then they're going to be in the same shape that all the independent mom and pop and private industry is in, because none of them can go back to work. So everybody's going to get hit sooner or later. It's just a question of when. And
if not by losing their job, by taxes that have to go,
exactly,
that are going to have to be made up.
Because you know he's going to try and raise taxes, and so is the legislature.
So
Okay,
I would like to see.
would you like the floor back?
It's okay. It's okay.
No, it's good.
I apologize.
All that she said, yes. But so these city managers and they're acting as the director of emergency services have written letters explaining, and they're not letters, but it's actually, these are like different proclamations. But it would be, I think it would be good for our city to do that. You know, and you could, I think that we could say that addressing this isn't a priority, but the priority is the health and safety of our citizens, the businesses, people not losing their homes. I mean, we just went through this whole HUD thing, you know what I mean? I mean, are we going to make sure people don't lose their homes, or are we going to pull their homes out from under them, right? And so there's all different, I'm sure you've seen all of them, Chris, come across your desk. And so I think it would be good for us just to acknowledge the problem and where we stand on it without having to, I mean, it doesn't matter what we vote on today. We can't take away the governor's authority. I mean, and so it would be stupid to do something like that.
I said I was so proud of him and saying we have no authority to remove his authority.
Right.
And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So,
But I think we need to, I mean, make some acknowledgments. Yeah. So, I don't know, you probably have a
So
whole
we
list.
actually have the honor of having Tom on the line, who I believe is the city attorney in Wildemar, that could probably provide some more detailed information on what was provided in Wildemar, if the council would like.
If I could interject before you
Yes, go ahead,
go to
Michael. You have the floor.
city attorney.
Michael has the floor.
I appreciate everybody's comments tonight about this situation. I want to say that what is going on is unprecedented. And from my perspective, being somebody who's taken the oath of office and taking an oath to uphold, support, and defend and uphold the Constitution, not once, not twice, but more than 7 times in different capacity, this is the most un-American thing that has happened to the United States ever. And I say that, and it goes back to the governor is continuing to push fear in people. The public health officers are continuing to push fear in people, fear to get compliance. And the other thing is that the governor is doing just that to cities. Do what I say, or else you will lose funding. And that's another form of fear and coercion to get cities to comply and go along with his orders. And the question is we all started this back on, we had the emergency meeting on March 16th and went into a state of emergency because the information that we had at the time was this virus was highly contagious. This virus has a high death rate, and yet now we're 2 months later, and we've found that the mortality rate is drastically lower than what was first anticipated it to be. We had to, quote, flatten the curve to make sure that the hospitals were not going to be overwhelmed. And we're to the point today where the hospitals are underwhelmed. In fact, hospitals are laying people off because there's so few people going to hospitals. And I think that we need to have a realistic look, and do we want to continue to live in fear because the governor is making us live in fear? You do what I say or else I will make you stay in quarantine even longer. And it goes back to what I said earlier tonight. If people choose to wear a mask or stay inside, they have that absolute God-given right to do that, and nobody will judge them for it. And I think that people that are high risk need to continue to maintain protection from themselves because it is contagious. It's contagious like the flu.
But then it goes back to, are we going to create a state of emergency because we had 50 DUIs and they killed 200 people? Or are we going to create a state of emergency because the influenza, it's flu season and more people are dying from the flu? We need to take a realistic, methodical look at this. And yeah, I get it. People are scared because government has made this political. And it's beyond the numbers. It's beyond the reality. We're 2 months into this, 3 months into this, and we're seeing the actual numbers, not the projections, actual cases. And the government and the CDC has already put out that if they suspect somebody with COVID, they're related COVID. It's funny that the Trump administration said that they're going to investigate all the COVID deaths out of New York because New York's got the highest death cases of COVID. As soon as they did that, amazingly, their COVID cases dropped in half because they started to reclassify what people are really dying from. I just think that we need to really be cautious, and I want to be cautious with people, but the fact of the matter is that the death rate was grossly overstated, and we're now seeing the true numbers. Are there high-risk groups? Yes. Do those high-risk groups need to be protected? Yes. But the people that are at low risk don't need to be in it. What is the cost to, do we continue to shut down our economy and continue to do the most un-American thing that's ever been done in the history of our nation and completely shut everything down and make people live in fear? I think that's a gross overcalculation. Again, I'm going to say it's the most un-American thing that has ever happened in my lifetime. And I think that by continuing to listen to the governor who wants to continue to create fear in the people in our cities by withholding funding, I think that sending a letter is not going to do anything, to be honest. I mean, I applaud the other cities that took a stand. I think that more cities need to take a stand, but I think the city of Hemet definitely needs to take a stand because we're going to lose revenue from the state. The longer we keep our businesses closed and our economy shut down, we're going to lose more money. More money. Because people aren't out there doing what people do. That's all I have for the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Tom, did you want to respond to the city manager's question?
Sure. Thank you. The city of Wildomar, through its director of emergency services, who's the city manager, on Friday after the Riverside County Board of Supervisors meeting, issued a director of emergency services order, which essentially lists priorities. It goes through and discusses the fact that the city of Wildomar, as all cities are facing diminishing general fund revenue. And based on the fact that it has diminishing general fund revenue, it has to prioritize items that will be focused on for that general fund revenue, and listed things like police and fire, emergency services, building and safety, road repair, and other quality of life services as high priority items. And then it lists that the enforcement of state and county health orders related to COVID-19 is not a local priority due to the diminishing resources that the city has. That emergency services order, of course, has to be ratified by the city council, as all emergency services orders do, and it is on their city council agenda for their meeting tomorrow night for approval and ratification.
Okay. Well, thank you for that summary, and that sounds very similar to, I think, the action that our neighboring city, San Jacinto, took, basically saying that people need to be responsible for themselves, and it was not a priority for the city of San Jacinto to enforce the state-imposed restrictions. I have just a couple of comments, I think, on this. I do believe in the concept that there's strength in numbers, and I'm encouraged by the position that our Riverside County supervisors have taken. I'm encouraged by the position that is being taken by the League of California Cities. Last week I participated in a mayor's Zoom meeting. There were 17 participants in that, and to a person, everybody was saying the same kinds of things that we're saying, is that to continue on as we're going is not sustainable. And I think we're going to be experiencing the fatigue and the impact at different points in different ways based on the financial health of individual cities. And every city is going to be unique. We certainly know that we're not in a strong fiscal position, and continuing to see businesses shuttered and not able to generate business, we're going to see businesses fail, and we'll see businesses struggle to reopen if they can. I appreciate the fact that there are efforts being made by businesses to try to survive, such as restaurants getting creative with takeout, but they can't sustain themselves and maintain their overhead. I appreciate all of the allowances that are being made by utility companies saying we're not going to shut off your utilities for lack of payment. There's a lot of positive things happening within people's and agencies' abilities to make adjustments to help people survive. But the bottom line is the city, we're sitting at the bottom of the totem pole of the decision making on this. I certainly concur with my colleagues that the threshold directives emanating from the state are absolutely unrealistic and unachievable. To expect that there will be no COVID-related deaths over a 14-year period, or 14-day period, 14 years, yeah, 14-day period, that's very unrealistic. We can't get through 14 days without a traffic fatality in the county. So to expect the county to not have any virus-related deaths in 14 days in the middle of a pandemic is absolutely unrealistic. So I think and depending on who you listen to, Councilmember Percival and I had an offline conversation about this. Depending on which doctor is making the report and making the projections or explaining the model, you get different opinions about the severity. And I drew an analogy of you talk to 10 different excellent auto mechanics and ask them what kind of oil should I put in my car, you'll get 10 different opinions about what's the best oil. And these are all very qualified expert mechanics. So I think the same thing translates to what we're struggling with as laypersons. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but I do know what I see and I do know what I hear, and I think that the state is going about it the wrong way. So whatever we can do as a city to continue to apply pressure at every level that we can. I've heard suggestion that a resolution from council. that would be a reasonable approach. I know that there's continued pressure being brought to bear through the League of California Cities, and that's our biggest hammer that we have to try to impact changes at the state level. We've already heard that we're getting support from other elected officials, assemblymen, and Congress, and I think that the message is getting there, and I really, this may be Pollyanna on my part, but I think that at some point we're going to see some reasonableness coming out of Sacramento that's going to make it palatable to us. Tom, I do have a city attorney question for you, and it has to do with consequences and a little bit of crystal ball stuff. We had a recommendation made earlier this evening by Councilmember Percival that we discuss rescinding our local declaration of an emergency. Do you anticipate, if we were to do something like that, any negative consequence or fallout to the city for taking that action?
Well, a couple things come to mind, and a couple things that would happen should the council decide to rescind the local declaration of emergency. I think one that we've already kind of touched on, you would likely put in jeopardy eligibility for reimbursements of expenses related to COVID-19 type activities. You would remove the ability of the city manager to act as the director of emergency services and to remove all of those emergency powers that go along with that pursuant to the city's ordinance, such as the emergency purchasing of supplies and equipment to be able to do that quickly, to be able to issue regulations regarding public health and safety quickly, always subject to ratification, and to issue Director of Emergency Services orders, like I mentioned, that the City of Wildomar has done. You may put the city's ability to enforce state orders in question. And you would remove, if you rescind the local declaration of emergency, that would remove any existing regulations or orders that have already been issued by the Emergency Services Director.
Okay. Well, that's a pretty significant laundry list of consequences. Thank you for that perspective. Yes. Linda has a question.
Hi, Tom. Carly just airdropped the Wildomar, what is it called? Director of Emergency Services, Order Number 2. I like it. But my question is, in this, I mean, because it basically just, it says, okay, COVID, you're not a priority. Governor, you're not a priority because we have to take care of our own people. But you reference in here there it is, down here at the bottom, Government Code Section 38791. What is that? Hello?
It is the Government Code section. So as I was mentioning, so the state law and city codes allow the formation of an emergency services council or a director of emergency services to be able to issue orders or regulations quickly during a declaration of local emergency. And so that's what that Government Code section and the section in the Wildomar Municipal Code say.
Okay, so with this emergency order, I mean, the core services are basically what we're looking at in Hemet, as in most cities, including the general fund reserve. So by passing this tomorrow with Wildmar, they're not telling the governor to go pound sand. They're just saying, look, governor, these are our priorities, and we have to do what's best for our community. But as I said, they're still acknowledging the fact that there are restrictions in place. Is that correct?
Correct. It is all cities have the ability to prioritize use of funding and use of general funds. And so that is simply what this Director of Emergency Services order says, is it lists high priority items and then states that enforcement of county and state health orders are not a local priority due to diminishing funds.
Okay. I like that. Plus, it also sends a message to our residents that we acknowledge that we're in charge of at least a couple things in our lives.
Carter?
And I think, more importantly than sending the message to the governor is sending it to our people and showing them that these are our priorities. And, end of story. You're going to do what you're going to do because you're a responsible adult. And that's kind of what we're telling them, right?
I think that that's a valid point and an important message for one of the problems that I've had all along was this definition of essential and non-essential businesses. In my opinion, essential business is, every business is essential. It's just a matter of degree. If I'm a business owner, and which I am, I have a home-based business, and I'd like to think that my revenue is essential to my livelihood in my home-based business. And if you're a corporation and you're selling widgets that people need, that's essential to you and your livelihood, and it's essential to your consumers. So I really do like, and there's been some shifting of definition from essential and non-essential to safe and unsafe. But I think for government to start deciding what is essential, I understand the objective. The objective is to try to protect people's health and safety, and we all have that in mind. But we're all generally adults, and we have a brain, and we can choose, as Councilmember Percival said, we have the right to choose in this country what to do and what not to do. And generally, I've always been an advocate that if you make good choices, you'll generally experience good consequences. If you make bad choices, you're generally going to experience a bad consequence. And this comes down to choices. We don't have the choice as a city to say we're not going to abide by the state mandates and just open everything up. It's not within our authority to do that. Only thing we have authority to do is tighten things further. And I'm not hearing any consensus that that's what we want to do here. So I appreciate the summary by our city manager and the update. With regard to a recommendation made earlier by Councilmember Percival, we have a motion and a second to discuss rescinding the local emergency declaration. So I think we've incorporated that discussion into this agenda item, but I think we need to bring some closure to that particular issue. So, Tom, legal opinion from you, is it appropriate that we entertain that as a motion at this point? We had a motion and a second to discuss it.
Well, Right. So what you've got is you've added this item to your agenda, which is a discussion to rescind the local declaration of emergency. Now you would need either further discussion on that item or a motion to rescind the local declaration of emergency.
Well, I think we've had the discussion because it's all been factored into all the comments,
That was the motion.
and that was the motion.
Well, I think the motion was to add it, and we already voted. So there's no more motion or second on the floor because we already voted.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But,
Correct.
but I do have another, you had mentioned, we just don't open up businesses. Or you said something like that, right, for the city of Hemet? And we're not responsible for opening businesses, right? We're not the controller of the businesses being open.
Right.
So I understand the rescinding thing. I think that it is more important for us to send a message to the people that what our priorities are as a city. And I think that that might free people up to make their own decisions on different things, and it's not our job to open and close because we didn't close them in the first place. And it's a little different, but I don't know that we even need a motion for that.
And Russ, if I may, and to Linda's point earlier, that I, along with her, don't want that on our backs as far as saying businesses can be open and
them losing their license.
And state authorities come and close them down and pull their license. And so it has to be, I mean, it just doesn't make sense, as you say, that, and Councilmember Meyer, that it's not our business to open or close businesses. So I think we all agree that this is ludicrous and it shouldn't be happening. But I'll tell you what, my personal opinion, because I've seen it starting already, is the stimulus money that's coming forth, that's forthcoming. It's kind of a payback from the governor for all he's putting us through. The point being is, it's substantial. And you have to look at the big picture. And if it would keep us from obtaining any of this funding for whatever reason we apply for, even as much as economic development, the funding that'll come in for economic development, much less infrastructure in any regard, believe me, and unfortunately, it's not going to be till about probably fall. But the point being is, it's gearing up to happen. So I would hate to put us in jeopardy to not be able to receive any of that funding should we choose to go after it. Again, it's all about being responsible for yourselves. I'm not going to hate somebody because they, walked into a store without their face mask. If I have mine on, then I'm doing what I think I should do. But I don't know if it can go any further than what we've already discussed as far as outlining our priorities and what we see as a city, and giving the ability to our residents to make their own choices. And
two things,
Yeah.
real quick. It's 9:58.
I know,
And
I swore I
we're
wasn't going to
approaching
stay past 10.
the 10 o'clock. So I think we're going to go a couple of minutes past that. So I'm going to have a motion to extend past 10 p.m.
Yes, motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Second?
Oh, come on.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Wright?
Okay, we'll talk fast. Say yes.
yes, not after 10:50.
Member Percival?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not me. Is he there?
Michael, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here, but my phone's about to die.
Okay. We're We're voting on a motion to extend past 10 p.m.
To 10:15. Or 10:30.
I'll vote yes.
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Okay, my next comment, just to try to bring some closure to this, I'm sensing that there's an interest in having staff bring a resolution maybe to our next meeting.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.